On this Monday night, making it easier for the fully vaxxed to come back. What the new rules allow Canadian travelers with 2 doses to do.
It is the traveler's responsibility to plan ahead.
The app you'll need to use, and the demands for a more comprehensive plan for travelers. Mixing mRNA vaccines with Pfizer shipments delayed should you take Moderna as your second shot.
It's like just going to the gas station, you don't care about the brand.
Plus, taking the cheer out of the Olympics. New restrictions so the Tokyo Games can go on. And a new Manitoba writer's story of Indigenous traditions becomes a New York Times bestseller.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin with breaking news tonight. A tornado has touched down in Quebec, in a community just north of Montreal. Environment Canada confirmed the tornado touched down based on video shared online. It happened in Mascouche, a community about 45 kilometers north of Montreal. Municipal officials confirm 1 person is dead. There are reports of widespread damage. The local chapter of the Red Cross has been deployed to the area to assist between 50 to 100 people who have been displaced. The town's mayor is urging people to stay away from the affected areas so emergency crews can go in and help those who need it and clear debris. There is a severe thunderstorm watch in place for parts of southern Quebec, but there was no specific tornado warning from Environment Canada. There is another small step coming towards a return to normal life, at least when it comes to travel for Canadians. Starting on July 5th, most international travel restrictions for Canadians, permanent residents, and certain foreign nationals who are fully vaccinated will lift. They'll no longer have to self-isolate or stay in a quarantine hotel on arrival in Canada. They must have had vaccines approved for use in Canada. Children under 12 who are not vaccinated will be able to travel too, but will still have to quarantine at home for 2 weeks. As of today, more than 7 million Canadians have had that double dose, just under 20% of the population. This cracks open the door to easier travel, but it's not a complete restart plan. And it doesn't open up Canada to fully vaccinated citizens from other countries. In our top story tonight, David Akin explains the new rules and what you need to know to prove your vaccination status.
We haven't reached the finish line. There's a lot more work to do.
An important point for fully vaccinated Canadians and permanent residents who can start thinking about punching their tickets and avoiding quarantine. But there is a catch.
To be very clear, with fully vaccinated travelers, you will still need to meet a series of requirements.
Requirement 1, you must use the federal government's ArriveCan app on your smartphone. That app is mandatory and has already been used 2 million times.
Our ArriveCan app has proven to be a very effective application.
Using that app, enter your travel history for the prior 14 days. Enter confirmation of a negative PCR test taken before you return to Canada. Then, upload digital copies of your proof of vaccination. And right now, the only vaccines Canada will accept are Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, and Johnson & Johnson. No others.
It is the traveler's responsibility to plan ahead, to understand their obligations, and to ensure that they are eligible.
You will also have to carry a paper copy of your vaccine proof. Upon arrival in Canada, you must take another PCR test. Do all that, and if your tests are negative, your reward is at hand.
Fully vaccinated travelers will no longer have to quarantine or complete the 8-day test.
Now, for everyone else, there are no changes to the rules. The government's quarantine hotels will still be running, and foreign nationals on non-essential travel, in other words, tourists, are still prohibited.
This government believes that a prudent, careful, and cautious approach to alleviating measures is what's required.
And there wasn't even a hint today of what comes next. When will we move to the next set of restrictions coming off? In fact, industry and travel groups condemn the federal government for not even providing benchmarks or metrics that must be met to move to the next phase of border reopening. Donna?
All right, David, thanks. It will still be a challenge to navigate all the rules around travel, not just for Canadians coming home, but for those trying to make plans for trips to other countries in the months ahead. From tourists itching to fly to families anxious to reunite, obstacles remain in place. Robin Gill explains.
Angela Joy and her family are anxious to visit the United States. She's fully vaccinated, but her 2 children, both under 12, are not.
I would feel comfortable traveling right now, but it's really just the logistical afterwards that is kind of the hiccup in the whole thing.
Any travel outside of Canada would require a 14-day quarantine coming back for the young ones. Even though under the new rules, Mom doesn't have to.
We want to be able to travel like everybody else and like the rest of the world.
The Ontario family would like to reunite with Angela's dad, Mike, at their cabin in Washington State. He's double-dosed and stuck in British Columbia. Just a 45-minute drive to the family's second home at the base of Mount Baker, which he can even see from this side of the border, but can't get to.
What's the sense of having a second vaccination if you can't move around freely?
And undoubtedly, this will be challenging for families who want to travel.
Travel agents say there is still some hesitancy, but that travel demand is picking up.
We are seeing what I would call a bit of a booking boom. Nowhere near the levels pre-pandemic.
There's really pent-up demand. We've been locked down for so long. You can only look at the same 4 walls for so long.
For now, Mike Joy can only stare at family photos and feel frustrated that it could be easier for him to fly to Europe than to drive across the border.
NHL players can move freely across the border now, but yet they, for some reason, choose to neglect the average person.
And here's the other need for travel in the Joy family. Angela's husband is a pilot and hasn't been working since the pandemic began.
I want people traveling, not just for myself, but so my husband can go back to work.
Just another reason they're so ready to finally take off. Robin Gill, Global News, Vancouver.
Further easing of restrictions will require more Canadians to get fully vaccinated. And on that front, more progress is expected this week. Over 5 million more doses are slated for delivery to Canada. That includes nearly 2.8 million doses from Moderna and 2.4 million from Pfizer BioNTech. This week's Pfizer delivery, though, has been delayed by a few days, and that's caused some clinics which were counting on it to pivot to Moderna. Public health experts say because both are mRNA vaccines, they are interchangeable. But there are reports some people are canceling appointments to wait for Pfizer. As Jamie Mauracher reports, public health officials urge Canadians to take the first vaccine they're offered.
Ottawa residents rolled up their sleeve to receive a shot of Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine, regardless of what their first dose was.
We are being told that either one is good, so we'll do it.
But not everyone was so at ease with the idea of mixing doses.
Either one, as long as it's two the same. I haven't seen the science that says you can mix.
After a delay in Canada's Pfizer shipment, Ontario announced this week it was reserving the vaccine for young people between 12 and 17, the only shot approved for that age group. Quebec is also offering only Moderna at its walk-in clinics. Meantime, Alberta Health Services says booking with Moderna will get you an earlier appointment.
You have these 2 different choices and it doesn't really matter. This is like just going to the gas station. You don't care about the brand.
While some question the lack of studies specifically examining the mixing of mRNA vaccines, experts suggest they do appear to be interchangeable, much like other vaccines we already use to fight things like the seasonal flu. Canada's National Advisory Committee on Immunization says the same goes for Moderna and Pfizer.
You can be a purist and say, look, the trials have been done that way. But right now we have so much real-world evidence developing.
Doctors say getting different shots of the COVID-19 vaccine can even increase the likelihood you'll be protected from variants, thanks to a wider range of antibodies, ramping up your immune response. Good news as the aggressive Delta strain threatens a 4th wave. In a hotspot in Toronto, Daniela Di Giuseppe Antonio is relieved her parents were able to get fully vaccinated with the mixed dose.
I'm just glad they did. So now we can feel a little bit safer and they can go out a little bit more.
Safer and sooner, too. Jamie Mauracher, Global News, Toronto.
One of the wild cards in reopening plans is that highly transmissible Delta variant, which is fast becoming the dominant strain around the world. Canada's Public Health Agency says it's been detected now in every province and at least 1 territory. As of late last week, more than 2,000 cases had been confirmed in Canada, though whole genome sequencing is needed to be sure of the actual numbers. In the United Kingdom, the Delta variant is responsible for a steep rise in cases, and experts are watching the situation closely. Eric Sorensen explains what's been discovered so far.
Remember these symptoms? Headaches, runny noses, sore throats. They're making a comeback as common symptoms of COVID. As vaccines provide better protection, especially in older populations who've doubled their doses more quickly, the spread of the Delta variant is affecting more young people and in a different way, according to British researchers.
It's more like a bad cold in this younger population, and people don't realize that. The number one symptom is headache, and then followed by sore throat, runny nose, and fever.
Reported COVID symptoms of headaches, sore throats, and runny noses are much more common in people under age 40 than those over 40. Original COVID symptoms, coughs, and the loss of smell and taste are less frequent now. Still, the Delta variant is twice as transmissible as the original virus, and young people are stoking the spread.
They still go out to parties, and they might spread it around to 6 other people. We think this is fueling a lot of the problem.
After the UK reopened last month, case numbers per capita have risen. In Canada, the case numbers are still coming down, but are being watched closely as this country opens up. Even if the Delta variant spreads quickly, some doctors say 2 doses of vaccines will offer protection from serious illness.
Now that the majority of people are having just basically, the sniffles, we don't need to monitor that. The primary metric for us is hospitalization, because that is what led us to have to restrict the community. Now, if you have a bunch of cases and no hospitalizations or very few, we don't need to lock down anymore.
There are 2 time lags that make it hard to predict the near future in Canada. Public contact is just starting up, and second doses are still catching up. Gauging the spread of the variant and the strength of the shield against it will require time. But doctors are increasingly confident that a future surge will not overwhelm hospitals if we keep vaccinating.
It's important for us to now have confidence in how effective these vaccines are, and they are our ticket out of here. We're on the off-ramp right now.
With enough second doses, an off-ramp with more cases in bed at home and fewer in the intensive care unit. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
For the first time in more than a century, a private citizen has received a formal rebuke from the House of Commons. Opposition MPs say it was necessary after the head of Canada's Public Health Agency, Ian Stewart, refused to hand over documents related to 2 scientists, originally from China, who were fired from the National Microbiology Lab in Winnipeg in 2019.
To reprimand you for the Public Health Agency of Canada's contempt, refusing to submit the required documents. The House further ordered you to immediately submit unredacted version of the documents to it.
Earlier this year, a House of Commons committee ordered the Public Health Agency to turn over unredacted documents on the decision to fire the scientists. That did not happen. Last week, MPs passed a Conservative-backed motion to find the health agency in contempt of Parliament. The government has said it cannot turn over the documents because of what it calls national security concerns. No charges have been laid in the case, but the 2 scientists remain under RCMP investigation. Tracking Claudette. Coming up, the tropical storm moving up the Atlantic coast, heading for Canada. Plus, 2 Catholic churches go up in flames in BC. A powerful storm is tracking north toward Canada right now after leaving a trail of destruction in the southern U.S. Tropical Storm Claudette is being blamed for more than a dozen deaths. In Alabama, it caused dangerous flash flooding and spawned a powerful tornado.
All of a sudden, the trees over this way, behind the houses over there, they just it was just like they imploded.
Claudette is expected to lose some steam as it enters Canadian waters, though forecasters warn it could still bring heavy downpours and gusty winds to parts of Nova Scotia and Newfoundland and Labrador tomorrow. No storm surge is expected. In British Columbia, an investigation is underway after 2 Catholic churches were destroyed in overnight fires. The churches were located about 40 kilometers apart on Penticton and Osoyoos Indian Band lands. Officials say both of the fires began about the same time early this morning. They've not said whether they believe the 2 are connected, though police say they are treating both fires as suspicious. Ahead, why there's going to be an awkward silence in the stands at the Olympics in Tokyo. The Summer Olympics have already been delayed by a year. Spectators from foreign countries have been told they're not welcome. But today, the organizers said some Japanese spectators will be allowed, though they won't be able to cheer. Redmond Shannon reports on the ever-evolving rules around the Tokyo Olympics.
The COVID-modified Olympic Village is ready for athletes. And organisers say they are ready for fans. Venues will now be allowed a spectator capacity of 50%, up to a maximum of 10,000 people.
Well, I got to tell you, my reaction this morning when I heard that was, yay! And I have to do it quietly because it's pretty much what I'm going to have to do when I'm in Tokyo.
That's because Team Canada's chef de mission, Marnie McBean, and everyone else at the arenas will not be allowed to cheer.
I think to golf, I think to tennis, I think to live theater that a quiet audience can give incredible gravitas to a moment. And for sure, you know what? People are going to still do, they're going to gasp and they're going to clap and they're going to stomp.
The three-time Olympic champion says her athletes are just happy to be competing after the one-year delay, even if no Canadian fans will be allowed to travel.
I know it's not perfect. Nothing has been over the last 18 months, but there will be witnesses. There will be people present to share in the energy, in the moment.
The IOC says not everyone in the Olympic bubble will be vaccinated.
For the residents of the Olympic villages, it will be well above 80%.
So far, only 1 in 6 Japanese people have received a vaccine dose. And Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga warns that if infections in the country rise again, events may yet happen without any fans. Polls suggest most Japanese people want the Games postponed or cancelled. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
A weightlifter from New Zealand will make history as the first transgender athlete to compete at an Olympic Games. That's Laurel Hubbard. She will compete in the women's super heavyweight 87 kilogram plus category. The 43-year-old had participated in men's weightlifting competitions before transitioning in 2013. In 2015, the International Olympic Committee updated qualifying requirements for transgender athletes. The rules allow women to compete as long as their testosterone levels meet requirements.
We do know that there are many questions about fairness of transgender athletes competing in the Olympic Games, but I would like to take this opportunity to remind us all that Laurel has met all of the required criteria. She is a very dedicated and resilient athlete.
Up next, an Indigenous writer's words of wisdom become a bestseller. An Indigenous writer from Winnipeg has landed a major literary accolade. Her book is called I Sang You Down from the Stars. It tells the story of a Cree mother preparing for the birth of her child. In late April, it debuted at number 3 on the New York Times bestsellers list. Here's Tasha Spillett-Sumner talking about her book and what inspired her to write it.
Ice began to melt. We visited the river. I've always admired picture books, but now with my daughter, there's a new inspiration to write own voice picture books in which our children can see themselves and our families and communities reflected in beautiful, dignified ways on the page. I started writing I Sang You Down from the Stars when I first found out I was pregnant with Isabella. I wanted to tell the story that our teachings hold about how children come to our families. I got it for you. So the story in I Sang You Down from the Stars is really a love song between a mother and a child. In that time when she's hoping and wishing for the child and then preparing for the child to come into her family's lives. As an author, I feel like it's my responsibility and part of my gift to write into reality a world that is worthy of my daughter, that is worthy of all of our children. And each of us do that in our own way. I picked up a small stone for you. So that Indigenous people come from such beautiful, strong teachings that have kept our nation strong and alive through, some of the most horrific things. And of course, we know that nationally Indigenous communities are grieving from the revealing of so many unmarked children graves. And so I think about particularly now as we hold our children in our arms, it's so important that we do everything that we can to ensure that they still have a connection to that ancestral beauty, strength, to keep our nations going, to keep our family structures going.
Tasha Spillett-Sumner. And that is Global National for this Monday. I'm Donna Friesen. We leave you tonight with a long-awaited change to a park in Halifax. Local officials and Mi'kmaq leaders gathered to unveil the Peace and Friendship Park. The park had originally been named after the founder of Halifax, Edward Cornwallis, who placed bounties on Mi'kmaq men, women, and children. The mayor says the new name symbolizes the desire to work together to recognize a wrong and not be bound by history, but rather informed by its lessons. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.